My son called, full of pride about the new apartment he'd secured for his wife, Alina. But what he said next chilled me to the core. "Dad," he said, "you're covering the mortgage. We've decided it's your responsibility." I thought he was joking until a lawsuit arrived, demanding over $800,000. Suddenly, it was all too real. Everything changed the day the judge reviewed the evidence. No one expected what came next. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, rattling against a chipped ceramic mug filled with cold coffee. I glanced at the screen. Evan. My son, always calling at strange hours. I dried my hands on a dish towel, the coarse fabric catching against my rough palms, and picked up. His voice burst through, bright and boastful like a salesman closing a deal. "Dad, you won't believe it. We got the penthouse in downtown Haverly. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern everything." Alina's ecstatic. I smiled, leaning against the counter. The image of Evan living in a sleek, high-rise apartment warmed me, despite the frigid air slipping through the kitchen window. My own home, a modest two-story on the outskirts of town, creaked quietly under the weight of a fresh snowstorm. "That's amazing, son. I'm proud of you. Really proud." "Yeah, it's a game changer. You've got to see it." He hesitated, his tone shifting slightly, like he was testing the waters. "We're thinking of stopping by soon. You know, to celebrate. You'll do something special for us, right? You always come through." The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. I frowned, my grip tightening around the phone. "Something special? Like what, Evan?" He laughed quick and sharp. "Oh, you'll figure it out. You always do. Anyway, Alina's calling. See you soon, Dad." Click. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering just above it. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the faded wallpaper and scratched linoleum closing in around me. Evan's voice echoed in my head, soaked in expectation. A tone I hadn't heard before. Or maybe I had and chose to ignore. I set the phone down too hard. A photo frame on the shelf tipped, falling face first. The glass cracked across a picture of Evan at about 10 years old, grinning on my shoulders, gap-toothed and carefree. My chest tightened. I moved into the living room, the floorboards groaning under each step. The old couch sank beneath me like always, and my eyes drifted toward the snow piling up outside the window. I had spent most of my adult life making sure Evan had everything: tuition, his first car, even the deposit for his wedding. Each of those sacrifices had felt like laying bricks in a wall meant to hold us close. But now, his casual "you always come through" gnawed at me. What did he really mean? Restless, I got up and began tidying the house. Evan hadn't visited in months. The thought of him and Alina stepping into my cluttered space stirred both pride and unease. I straightened the cushions, dusted the mantel. My hands moved without thought. The photo frame still lay where it had fallen, the glass splintering through Evan's childhood smile. I didn't touch it. Not yet. The kettle shrieked from the stove. I poured hot water over a tea bag, watching steam curl and vanish in the dim light. I told myself I was overthinking. Evan was my son. He could be flashy, sure, but not cruel. Still, that voice, that entitlement, it lingered. I took a sip, wincing as the tea burned my tongue, then glanced at the clock. 9 p.m. too late to call anyone. Too early for sleep. I paced the room, my socks dragging slightly over the frayed edges of the carpet. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing everything in silence. I stood by the window, my reflection faint in the glass, a 63-year-old man with streaks of gray in his hair and lines etched deep from years of quiet decisions. I thought of Evan's penthouse, all that glass and modern elegance. And I wondered, how did he afford it? His work as a digital strategist paid decently, but not that well. Doubt flickered. I pushed it aside. He was my son. I raised him right. Or so I believed. Then I heard it. A low hum. Tires crunching snow. Headlights swept across the yard, bright against the dark. My heart picked up speed. Evan's car. I set the mug down. Hot tea sloshed over the rim. That unease returned, a quiet prickle crawling up my neck. The front door swung open with a blast of icy wind and laughter. Evan stepped inside, snow dusting his coat, Alina gliding in behind him like she was making an entrance. Her heels clicked across the hardwood, precise, confident. I forced a smile, hands still damp from cleaning. Evan. Alina. Good to see you. I gestured toward the living room. Come in. Have a seat. Tea? Coffee? Alina's lips curled, not quite a smile. No thanks, Rob. We won't be long. She smoothed her coat, her fingernails glinting like polished rubies. Evan clapped me on the shoulder too hard, then flopped onto the couch like he owned it. Place hasn't changed, Dad. Still the same old couch. He grinned, but his eyes swept the room, sharp and calculating. I caught the edge in his voice, like he was appraising my life and finding it inadequate. I sat across from them, the worn coffee table between us. Its scratched surface held a tray of untouched cookies. So, tell me about this penthouse, I said, steadying my voice. Sounds like a major step. Evan leaned back, arms spread wide, his grin stretching just a little too far. Massive marble countertops, skyline views. Alina's already planning the housewarming. He glanced at her, and she gave a small nod, her expression smooth, like she was waiting for her cue. It's gorgeous, she said, her voice like polished glass. Exactly the kind of place you'd want to raise a family, right, Evan? I nodded, my pride wrestling against that lingering unease from Evan's earlier call. Must have cost a fortune. You two handling all that okay? Evan's smile twitched just for a moment. Then Alina leaned forward, her purse sliding off the couch and landing with a soft thud. She reached inside and pulled out a glossy folder. The embossed logo of Durant Trust Bank gleamed under the living room light. My stomach twisted as she set it down, her fingers lingering on the cover like she was presenting a gift. Colin, she said, her tone clipped and businesslike, we wanted to talk about the mortgage. I blinked, my hands resting on my knees. The mortgage. Evan's voice jumped in, louder now, filled with forced enthusiasm. Yeah, Dad. It's a lot. But you've always been there for us, college, the wedding, everything. You've never let us down. He leaned in, elbows on his knees, like a salesman closing a final deal. We figured you'd cover this too. My mouth went dry. I looked from Evan to Alina. Her gaze was fixed on me, calm, calculating, unblinking. Handle it? I asked quietly. You mean, pay for it? Alina's smile tightened just slightly. It's your responsibility, Colin. You've always been our foundation. We assumed you'd be happy to help. The air in the room thickened. My fingers curled into the armrest, fraying the fabric beneath them. You're asking me to pay for your apartment? I said slowly. That's not how this works, Evan. His face hardened. Not how it works, Dad. We're family. Are you really going to let us lose this place? After everything you've done, this is where you draw the line. His voice sharpened, turned accusing, like I was the one doing something wrong. I stood, knees aching slightly under the weight of it all. I've given you enough. More than enough. This is your life, not mine. Alina sighed like I was throwing a tantrum instead of standing my ground. She stood, brushing off her coat with precise, practiced movements. Think about it, Colin. We'd hate for this to get messy. She nodded at the folder, still on the table, its edges rigid and out of place in my humble living room. Evan followed her to the door, his jaw tight with frustration. You're making a mistake, Dad. Don't say we didn't warn you. The front door slammed behind them loud, final. The sound echoed through the quiet house like the crack of a gavel. Alina's heels faded into the snow outside. And then, just silence. I lowered myself back into the chair, my heart hammering. The folder sat there, untouched, gleaming like a threat. I reached for it. My hand hovered, trembling. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Evan's words circled in my mind. You've always had our backs. but now they sounded twisted, bitter. I'd raised him, loved him, poured every spare ounce of my energy into building a life for him. And this was the return? The room was dark now. Outside, snow glowed faintly under the street lamp. I stared at the folder, the shock in my chest slowly calcifying into something colder, harder. They thought I'd cave. Like always. Just write another check and clean up their mess. But they were wrong. The folder lay half open, its pages fanned across the table like an insult. I hadn't touched them since Evan and Alina left, but their weight pressed on me like bricks. My hands twitched, ready to tear it all apart. Instead, I sat frozen. The only sound in the house was the hum of the heater and the dull thud of snow against the window. I thought of Evan at 19, his eyes lit with joy as I handed him the keys to his first car. I had worked double shifts for months to make that happen. My back still bore the strain. He hugged me that day, promised he'd make me proud. Those promises now felt like lies, every one of them a deeper wound. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping across the floor. I paced the room, feet catching on the frayed rug like they always did. That folder wasn't just paper. It was betrayal, carefully crafted, delivered with a smile. Alina's voice came back to me, full of cool arrogance. "It's your responsibility, Cullen." And Evan, echoing her, like I was just a wallet dressed in worn-out flannel. I stopped by the fireplace. My eyes landed on the old photo of Evan, still in its cracked frame. That gap-toothed smile twisted behind the fractured glass. I picked it up. My thumb traced the crack. For a brief, dangerous second, I wanted to hurl it across the room. Instead, I placed it down hard. The thud barely registered in the hush. My mind reeled with memories I'd tried to forget. The way Evan brushed off the wedding costs. "You got this, Dad." The loans I'd co-signed for his tech venture. The same loans I was still paying off. Every one of those moments, those choices, they were weights now. Pressing down, crushing. Had I been blind? Or just desperate to believe he'd become something better? I stepped to the window. Snow had covered the lawn completely, erasing everything in smooth white silence. My reflection stared back. A tired man who'd given too much for too long. And then I heard it again. Not their voices. Not the wind. Just my father's rising from a place long buried. His stern words ringing loud and clear in my mind. "One day, you'll have to stop being everyone's foundation and start standing for yourself. Don't let anyone walk over you, Colin," my father had told me once. I'd nodded at the time, but the words hadn't stuck, at least, not when it came to Evan. I'd wanted to be the kind of father mine never was. The kind who gave without question. And now here I was, staring down at a folder demanding everything I had left. My hand drifted toward it. I flipped it open. The numbers blurred together, over $7 million, monthly payments broken down in staggering detail. My name was there, printed neatly in a box labeled cosigner. My chest tightened. They hadn't just asked for my help. They had planned this. Signed on my behalf, without my consent. They'd forged my name, counting on me to cave like I always had. The boldness of it sparked something deep in me. A sudden, sharp surge of anger. I slammed the folder shut. The sound cracked through the silence like a slap. I dropped onto the couch, head in my hands. I'd always believed love meant sacrifice, but this wasn't love. It was exploitation. Evan and Alina had twisted my trust into a tool, a transaction. But I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. Not anymore. The room felt colder now. The old radiator hissed weakly in the corner, struggling against the chill. I stood again, restless, and grabbed my phone off the counter. Its screen lit up with a single notification. A post from Alina. My thumb hovered. Then I tapped it. Her words cut through the screen, clear and cruel. "Some people forget what family means when money's involved," she wrote. A winking emoji followed, mocking. Below was Evan's comment, "Guess Dad's too selfish to help us build a future." The words twisted in my gut, each one sharper than the last. I scrolled. More comments followed, piling on like vultures. Strangers, neighbors, even former coworkers I hadn't heard from in years. Ungrateful old man. What kind of father does that? My face burned with shame. The kind that seeps into your bones. I dropped the phone onto the couch, the thud swallowed by the weight of the moment. The folder still sat on the table, its glossy edge catching the light like a blade. I paced again. My socked feet scraped the worn rug, my thoughts spiraling. They hadn't just demanded my money, they'd turned me into a villain. A footnote in their carefully crafted narrative of success. A public enemy. And I thought of all the years I'd spent building something real. A life. A reputation. Steady Colin. The man who'd fix your furnace at midnight. The guy who covered your shift when your kid was sick. The one who gave, always gave, especially to Evan. Now it was all crumbling. One post at a time. The walls closed in. I grabbed my coat, desperate for air, ready to step out and clear my head. But then a knock. Sharp. Repeated. I froze, hand on the doorknob. Another knock. Firmer this time. I opened the door to find Marla, my neighbor. Her gray hair was tucked beneath a thick wool cap, and she held a plate of cookies in one hand. But her eyes, sharp behind square glasses, told me this wasn't a casual visit. "Colin, I saw that nonsense online," she said, stepping past me without waiting for permission. Her voice was low and crisp, laced with indignation. "Those two, parading their lies for everyone to see. It's disgraceful." I closed the door behind her. The cold air hung in the hallway like smoke. "You saw it, huh?" I muttered, setting the cookies on the counter. The scent of vanilla and sugar clashed with the bitterness tightening in my chest. "Everyone's seen it," she said, glasses slipping down her nose as she leaned closer. "Alina's got half of Mayfield eating out of her hand. But I know better. Evan's no innocent either. I've heard things, debts, shady dealings. They're not what they pretend to be." I raised an eyebrow, my pulse quickening. "What kind of things?" She waved a hand, the rings on her fingers catching the overhead light. "Enough to know they're in over their heads. And I won't stand by while they drag your name through the mud." Her voice struck through the fog clouding my thoughts. I hadn't expected this kind of fire from anyone. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted, dropping into a chair. The wood creaked beneath me. "They've fooled everyone." "Not everyone," she said, taking the seat across from me. Her eyes didn't waver. "You're not alone in this. I have a friend sharp as a tack. Knows how to dig through financials, contracts, the works. If they've buried anything, we'll find it." Her certainty cracked something open in me. The pressure in my chest shifted, not gone, but lighter. I nodded. Marla's presence, her conviction, it sparked something inside. I wasn't just a target anymore. I picked up my phone. The screen still displayed Alina's post, glowing like a scar. My thumb hovered over the app, then drifted toward my messages instead. There it was, a thread from Evan, buried beneath months of silence. I opened it. The message stared back at me, casual and careless. "Just sign the papers, Dad. It's for the business. No big deal." I stopped breathing for a moment. Those papers, had they been the start of this? My grip tightened around the phone, the plastic creaking under my fingers. Marla was still speaking, her voice a steady hum, but I barely heard her. That message, those words, they weren't just a request, they were a trail. A crack in Evan's armor. A clue. A way in. Maybe, just maybe, I'd found how to fight back. The kitchen smelled faintly of chamomile, steam rising from Marla's cracked mug as she leaned over my table. Her eyes scanned the old message from Evan on my phone. "Just sign the papers, Dad," it read. A year ago, it had sounded casual. Now, it felt smug, calculated. I slid the phone toward her. My chair scraped loudly against the worn vinyl floor. The folder Evan and Alina had left behind still sat in the living room. But that wasn't the one I needed right now. "This message was from before the wedding," I said quietly. "He told me it was for a marketing project. Some deal for his startup." I signed without reading it. I shook my head. Stupid, I know. Marla pursed her lips, her glasses catching the dull kitchen light. Not stupid, Colin. You were trusting. There's a difference. But they used that trust like a weapon. She sipped her tea and placed the mug down with a faint clink. I've heard rumors. Evan flashing money he didn't have, dinners, electronics, even a new car. And Alina's no better. All those curated posts about her perfect life, but no one can explain what she actually does. I leaned back in my chair, gripping my hands tightly to stop them from trembling. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, walls crowding in, heavy with memories. Promises. Blind faith. I'd co-signed loans. Cleared Evan's debts. Backed him again and again, believing he'd eventually grow into the man I hoped he'd be. But Marla's voice, sharp, certain, cut through that fog. They weren't invincible. They had weak spots. Evan's obsession with image. Alina's need for control. Her carefully polished world. I could use that. Marla, I said slowly, you mentioned your friend could look into their finances? She nodded, a glint sparking in her eye. Tom. He's retired now, but he used to investigate corporate fraud. If there's something to find, he'll dig it out. I'll call him in the morning. She tapped the table, her rings clicking against the wood. But you need to think, Colin, what's your endgame? You can't just absorb this. What do you want out of it? I stood, restless, and crossed to the sink. Outside, snow crusted the window, glowing under a porch light. My reflection stared back at me, older. Harder. They thought I'd fold, I murmured. They thought I'd just sign over the rest, like always. But I'm done being their fallback. Marla stood too, her chair creaking. She placed a hand gently on my arm. That's the Colin I remember. The one who patched my roof in the middle of that storm. You've always been the rock, and they've mistaken that for weakness. They're about to learn different. Her words settled in me like iron. I turned to face her. I'll start with those papers. If Evan lied about the business back then, there's more buried in there. And Alina? She's all surface. Crack the image, and it all collapses. Marla grinned. Now you're talking. She grabbed her coat. I'll get Tom on the accounts. You go through your records, contracts, receipts, emails. Anything that smells off. They've underestimated you, but we'll show them just how wrong they were. I nodded, my jaw clenched tight. The idea of fighting back didn't scare me anymore. It gave me focus. Purpose. I walked down the hallway with intention, opened the closet, and pulled back a heap of old jackets and boxes. Buried beneath them was a narrow dresser I hadn't touched in years. The bottom drawer groaned as I yanked it open. Inside, dusty, heavy with mildew, was a folder stuffed with papers from Evan's entrepreneurial days. I brought it to the kitchen and set it on the table. Marla's mug sat forgotten as she watched me spread the pages out. I scanned the brittle documents, eyes narrowing at familiar ink. Contracts, loan agreements, my signature next to Evan's. Again and again. Then I paused. A name caught my eye. One I didn't recognize, linked to a bank I'd never dealt with. A loan amount that didn't make sense. My pulse kicked. Marla, I said, my voice quiet. I think I just found something. The office smelled like stale coffee and dry ink, exactly the kind of place where people go when they want secrets uncovered. I sat across from Tom, Marla's friend. His desk was a storm of files, yellowed papers, and scrawled sticky notes. In the middle lay the folder I'd brought. My hands tapped nervously on the armrest, the vinyl squeaking with each movement. Outside, the streets of Newton, Massachusetts churned with late winter traffic. But in here, time felt slower, tighter. Tom adjusted his glasses and examined a sheet of paper under the desk lamp. Evan's been sloppy, he muttered, his voice gravelly. Half these business filings are tied to shell accounts. The other half, loans he's never made a single payment on. He flipped to another page. And Alina? She patted her resume with fake references. That PR job she posts about all the time? Based on fabricated experience. I reached out to 2 of the clients she listed. They don't exist. I leaned forward, my heart thudding. Can you prove all this? Tom gave a small smirk and shut the folder. Already did. I've traced over $260,000 in unpaid debts linked to Evan bad investments, overdrawn cards, and phantom consulting fees. And Alina's career is built on air. The evidence is solid. He slid a printed summary across the desk. Names, numbers, timelines, black ink, cold and unforgiving. You've got leverage now, Cullen. The question is, what do you do with it? I took the printout, the paper rough against my fingertips. My hands were steady, even as the fire in my chest burned hotter. Evan and Alina had built their lives on illusion, and I was about to tear it down. I want to expose them, I said quietly. But not as me. Not yet. Tom leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth lifting. Smart. Hit them where it hurts. Public perception. I can set you up with an encrypted email. Secure. Untraceable. You decide how and when to use it. I nodded slowly, my eyes still on the page. The war had started. And this time, I wasn't the one caught off guard. Send a tip to their circle. Let the gossip do the rest. I left Tom's office with the printout tucked into my coat, the city's cold stinging my face like needles. The snow in Newton had turned to sleet, biting through my scarf as I made my way home. Inside, the house was dark. The folder from Evan and Alina still sat on the table like an accusation, its glossy cover catching the dim kitchen light. I booted up my old laptop. The fan whirred like it was struggling to breathe, warning me with each shudder. Tom had already set up the anonymous email account. Clean. Untraceable. I opened a new message, my fingers hovering over the keys. Every word was sharp. Measured. Evan and Alina aren't who you think they are. Ask about his debts. Check her job references. I signed it simply, a friend. The irony wasn't lost on me. The cursor blinked above the send button. I thought of Alina's smug online post. Evan's dig about me being selfish. The way they turned my life into public target practice. This email wouldn't end them, but it would start something. I clicked send. The screen flashed as the message vanished into the digital void. And with it, something inside me shifted. It wasn't joy. It was something sharper, power. For the first time in years, I was no longer on defense. The laptop's glow threw long shadows on the walls. Outside, the world was hushed under thick snow. I closed my eyes and imagined Evan and Alina reading that email, watching their perfect facade splinter as whispers began to spread. They thought I would cave. They were wrong. My phone buzzed on the table, jolting me from the moment. Tom's name lit up the screen. I answered, my grip tight. Yeah. His voice came in fast, clipped with urgency. Colin. I dug deeper into those shell companies. Found something bigger, way bigger. You sitting down? My eyes flicked to the laptop. The email still open on the screen, the message already gone. And suddenly, this wasn't just personal. It was a doorway into something deeper. The cafe buzzed with quiet life, the clink of porcelain, murmurs over lattes, and the low hum of steam from the espresso machine. I sat across from Marla, a notebook open between us. The pages were cluttered with names, numbers, and fragments from Tom's investigation. Outside, the February snow swirled past the windows, melting against the glass. My laptop remained closed beside me, a weight heavier than it looked. That anonymous email had been the first crack. But Tom's call last night promised a fault line. Marla scanned my notes, her brow furrowed. So Tom says Evan's tied to a shell company, she asked quietly, her voice nearly lost under the hiss of milk frothing nearby. And Alina's job's built on sand? I nodded, tapping the notebook with the end of my pen. He found fake accounts. Money being funneled through names that don't exist. Evan signed my name on some of those docs years ago. Said it was for a safe investment. I believed him. My jaw clenched at the memory. Marla reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her rings flashed in the cafe light. "You loved him, Colin." "That's not a crime," she said, her voice gentle but unwavering. "What matters now is what you do with what you've found." I leaned back, the wooden chair creaking under me. The cafe's warmth couldn't thaw the cold knot in my chest. I thought of those documents, the ones I'd signed blindly. Evan's easy smile, his promises, his lies, each one a brick in the trap he'd built around me. But now those same papers were ammunition. "Tom's still digging," I said. "If we can prove fraud, this isn't just about their reputations, it could be legal." Marla's eyes lit up. A glint of mischief, fierce and bright. "That's the Colin I know. Go for the jugular." She unlocked her phone and scrolled. "I know a lawyer, Sarah Chen. Used to work corporate cases, fraud and identity misuse. She'll tell you if those signatures hold in court." I scribbled Sarah's name into the notebook, my hand pressing so hard the pen nearly tore the page. The plan was forming. Not just to expose Evan and Alina, but to dismantle the entire illusion they'd built, piece by piece. Evan cared about status. Alina lived for her image. I was going to take both away from them, using their own lies as the wrecking ball. But I'd need to be precise. No missteps. One wrong move, and they'd spin it back on me. A waitress passed, her tray clinking with mugs. I looked out at the street, people moving quickly, heads down, snow swirling around them. Somewhere, just a few blocks away, Evan and Alina were sitting in their pristine penthouse, completely unaware of the ground beginning to shift beneath them. The thought didn't make me smile. It gave me focus. I turned back to Marla. Her eyes met mine steady, supportive. She wasn't just a neighbor anymore. She was my ally, my tether to truth. She saw me clearly, not the selfish caricature Alina had painted for social media. "Marla," I said, my voice steady, "they made a mistake." She raised her cup in a silent toast. "To that mistake," she said, "and to them learning exactly what Colin's made of." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. A real one. I flipped to a fresh page in the notebook. Names, timelines, and strategy flowed from my pen like water. We talked targets, records, backup evidence, potential witnesses. The cafe noise faded into a distant hum. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was building something. And this time, it was my move. Evan and Alina thought their little social media theatrics had won them the game. Thought their pressure tactics would force me to fold. They were wrong. My phone buzzed, snapping the moment in half. I grabbed it. Evan's name blazed across the screen. A text. Short. Sharp. "Back off, Dad, or you'll regret it." The words hit like a slap. But I didn't flinch. I set the phone down calmly. Marla's eyes were already on me. She raised an eyebrow, waiting. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from clarity. He knew. He knew I was coming for them. Good. A white envelope sat on the kitchen counter, pristine under the humming fluorescent light. My name typed clean across the front, the crust of Tanner and Anth, Belmore LLP embossed in one corner. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. Evan and Alina's next move. I opened it anyway. The paper tore cleanly. Inside, legalese cloaked in arrogance. They were suing me. Over $750,000. Breach of verbal agreement, it claimed. Allegedly, I'd promised to pay for their luxury apartment and backed out. Their claim? I left them financially devastated. The nerve of it. But this time, I didn't crumble. I grabbed my keys and headed to Marla's house. The tires crunched over the fresh snow as dusk settled over the neighborhood. Her porch light was on, her house glowing like a lighthouse in stormy waters. When she opened the door, flour dusted her apron, and the scent of baking bread poured out. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, stepping aside. "Not a ghost," I muttered, handing her the letter. "A lawsuit." She scanned the document, adjusting her glasses. $750,000? They're out of their minds. Her voice sharpened as she tossed the letter onto the kitchen table. The soft jazz playing from her old radio clashed with the fury in her tone. They think they can see you into submission. I dropped into the chair, the oven's warmth soaking into the wood beneath me. They think I'll cave again, I said. But this isn't a lawsuit. It's a bluff. A desperate one. They felt the ripple from my email. Now they're scrambling. I thought of the old letters tucked away in my closet. Notes from Evan, begging for help, promising to pay me back. His own words. His own handwriting. I've got something they're not expecting, I said, leaning forward. Letters. From Evan. Asking for money, laying out promises. Those letters destroy their claim of a verbal agreement. Marla's eyes widened. You kept them? Colin, that's brilliant. She crossed to the counter and snatched up her phone. Sarah needs to see this. She'll tear their case to shreds. I nodded, tapping my fingers against the table. The lawsuit was aggressive but clumsy. Evan and Alina were arrogant, banking on my silence, my shame. But I wasn't ashamed anymore. I was angry. I was ready. Every move they made was predictable now. Every word meant to corner me. But they'd misjudged the one thing that mattered most. I wasn't playing defense anymore. Marla paced, slippers brushing the tile. She's posting again, she said with a sigh. Another photo. All smiles. Talking about justice and truth prevailing. I clenched my jaw. Let her talk. The more lies they post, the harder the fall. I crossed to the window. Her front yard was blanketed in untouched snow. The streetlights cast long, slanted shadows over the ground. I thought of my own house. The untouched folder on the table. The cracked photo of Evan from years ago. Memories once soft were now weapons. Marla hung up the phone with a nod of satisfaction. Sarah's free tomorrow. Bring the letters. This lawsuit? It's their last mistake. I exhaled, the weight on my shoulders beginning to lift, replaced by something fiercer. Resolve. I left her home and climbed into my car, the wind biting against my skin. The engine grumbled to life, and I eased onto the road. That's when I saw her, Alina, walking down the sidewalk like nothing had changed. Her coat spotless, her heels sharp against the snow. She glanced at her phone and smiled, a little too smug, a little too confident. She didn't see me. Not yet. But she would. The law firm sat like a monolith in the heart of downtown Elmbrook, its glass panels reflecting the pale March sky. I sat across from Sarah Chin, Marla's contact. Her office was a fortress of legal briefs, contracts, and intent. The shoebox of letters sat open on her desk, its contents spilling into daylight. Evan's handwriting covered the pages, pleas, broken promises, scattered IOUs. Dates, amounts, his signature etched again and again. Sarah read quickly, her pen dancing across a notepad. These are gold, she said, her voice crisp. They show a pattern, emotional pressure, financial manipulation. No court will buy the idea of a verbal mortgage agreement with all this in the record. I leaned back. The leather chair creaked beneath me. So, we can fight this? She smiled, tight and certain. Oh, we'll bury them. She held up one letter dated nearly 4 years back. Evan asking for money, claiming it was urgent. In it, he'd promised repayment, even signed a note. It predated their so-called verbal agreement by over a year. Their case isn't just weak. It's fiction, she said. They're bluffing, and we're calling it. The low hum of the office, the ringing phones and soft footsteps outside, it all blurred. I focused on the facts. Tom's investigation. These letters. My testimony. It was enough. Not just to fight the lawsuit, but to tear the masks off Evan and Alina once and for all. I thought of their penthouse. The luxury. The smug smiles. And I felt something rise in me. This was no longer about money. It was about reclaiming my name, my legacy, my dignity. That night, I sat in Marla's living room, a hot mug of tea warming my hands. The lawsuit might have been meant to break me, But all it had done was show me how much stronger I really was. The old lamp in Marla's living room cast a soft amber glow. Her plaid blanket lay folded neatly on the couch beside me, a comforting contrast to the storm brewing outside. We'd spent hours going over strategy, sorting timelines, and lining up evidence, but now the conversation had shifted, grown personal. "I fought my own battles, you know," she said, her voice quiet but sure. "Lost my husband young. Raised 2 kids on my own. People said I'd break." She paused. I didn't. I looked at her, really looked. The lines on her face weren't just from time. They told stories. Ones I'd never thought to ask about. "You're tougher than most, Marla," I said, and I meant it. Her strength, her unshakable loyalty, it grounded me. Made this fight feel like more than revenge. It gave it meaning. She let out a short laugh, warm and genuine. "And you, Colin, are stubborn as a mule. That's why you're going to win this." She refilled my mug. The steam curled between us, dancing in the lamplight. "You're not just fighting for yourself anymore. This is for everyone who's been used, taken for granted." Her words sank deep, settling in the part of me that had been pushed aside for years. I thought of the late nights I'd worked at the engineering firm to keep Evan in school, the corners I'd cut, the things I'd sacrificed, all for a future that was supposed to matter. But now I was fighting for something else, for the man I used to be, the one who deserved better. I pulled out my notepad and reviewed the growing arsenal, Tom's financial records, the forged documents, the letters. A precise timeline of Evan's lies. Sarah would present it all clean, methodical, devastating. I imagined the courtroom. Evan's face when the truth unfolded. Alina's composure cracking. The thought didn't bring satisfaction. It brought resolve. Justice wasn't loud. It was patient. Relentless. Marla stood and stretched. "Get some rest, Colin. Big days ahead." I nodded, gathering my things. The notepad felt heavier in my hand now, like a weapon finally ready to be used. The snow had eased outside, the air crisp and sharp. I was halfway to my car when my phone vibrated in my pocket. "Evan." I answered. My pulse didn't spike. My grip was steady. His voice came through, smooth, too smooth. "Dad, let's settle this quietly. No need for court, right?" I stood outside the lawyer's building, the city lights blurring around me in the dark. His words were bait. Calm on the surface, but laced with fear. I didn't hesitate. "We'll see about that, son." The courthouse towered over downtown Elmbrook, its gray stone facade cold against the biting April wind. I stood on the front steps, the folder of evidence in my hands, its edges worn from weeks of use. My tie was too tight, the knot a reminder of the weight of today. Beside me, Marla's scarf fluttered in the breeze. She rested a hand on my arm. "You've got this, Colin," she said quietly, her voice steady. "They don't stand a chance." I nodded, eyes fixed on the approaching crowd. And then I saw them. Evan and Alina, striding toward the courthouse. His coat hung open, his face flushed with tension. Alina walked beside him, every step sharp, her scarf pulled tight against the wind. Her heels clicked against the stone steps, too deliberate. They looked confident, but not completely. Their eyes locked with mine, and just for a second I saw it. The crack. Nervousness. "Dad," Evan called, voice louder than necessary, like he was performing for an audience. "Let's end this now. No court, no mess. You pay half the mortgage, we walk away clean." He stepped closer, breath visible in the cold air. "You don't want this dragged out, do you?" Alina nodded beside him, her expression carefully neutral. "It's reasonable, Colin. You've always helped us. One last time, and we're done." Her eyes flicked to the folder in my hand. And I saw it, just a flicker. Unease. I straightened my shoulders. The folder was more than evidence, it was armor. "You think you can scare me into giving in?" My voice was calm, measured. "You made this mess. Both of you. Now you get to stand in it." Evan's jaw clenched. His fists curled at his sides. "You're making a mistake," he said. "This will ruin you." His voice cracked. A threadbare threat. Alina put a hand on his arm. Her voice was tight. "Let's go, Evan." He's too stubborn to listen. But her eyes lingered, and in them I saw it again. Fear. They knew. Marla stepped forward, her voice like cold steel. "You hurt him. Either walk inside or walk away. Either way, Colin's ready." Evan glared at me, but Alina tugged him back. Her heels scraped the concrete as they turned. They whispered furiously to each other, heads pressed close. I didn't move. I watched them go, my heart steady. Not with anger. Not with doubt. With clarity. Tom's reports. Sarah's strategy. My letters. Everything I needed. Each lie Evan had ever written was in that folder. And now those same words would unravel everything he and Alina had built. Behind me, Marla rested a hand on my shoulder. "You're not just fighting for yourself anymore," she said quietly. "You're standing up for everyone they've stomped on." Her words hit hard. And they stayed. I wasn't just a father betrayed. I was a man taking his name back. I adjusted the folder in my arms. Its weight didn't scare me anymore. It grounded me. The brass handles on the courthouse doors glinted in the morning light. I took a breath and stepped forward, Marla at my side. The crowd outside moved like a tide, parting as we passed through. My hand touched the door handle, but something pulled me to glance back. Alina stood down the street, pale. She was saying something to Evan, urgent, frantic. Then she looked up. Our eyes met. No filters. No camera angles. Just panic. Raw and real. I turned away from their faces and pushed the courthouse door open, the folder in my hands pulsing like a heartbeat. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and old tension. The air hung thick, charged with anticipation. Every eye in the room was waiting. I sat on the bench beside Sarah, my lawyer, the folder open before her. My hands were clasped tight but steady. She rose, voice cutting through the stillness with sharp precision. She presented the letters, Evan's own handwriting. His scattered promises, desperate pleas for money. Each word, each signature, another nail in the coffin of their case. Behind me, Marla's presence was constant, a quiet strength. Her hand brushed mine when Sarah began to lay out Tom's findings, the web of shell accounts, the fabricated resumes, the unpaid debts. The judge, a silver-haired woman with a no-nonsense stare, leaned forward, her glasses glinting under the overhead lights. "These documents," she said, her voice textured like gravel, "paint a far different picture than what the plaintiffs have claimed." She held up one of Evan's letters, its edges curled and yellowed. "No credible evidence supports the alleged verbal agreement." None. Across the room, Evan shifted in his seat, his face flushed, his tie crooked. Alina sat beside him, stiff and pale. Her knuckles blanched around the straps of her purse, her eyes flicking toward the door like she was already preparing to flee. Their attorney stammered, papers slipping from his grasp. But Sarah didn't pause. She moved forward, relentless. "My client, Colin, was misled and exploited," she said, gesturing to the documents. "The plaintiff's financial misconduct and false representations show a clear pattern of manipulation, not obligation." I kept my gaze on the judge, my pulse steady. Each document, every note and receipt, was another brick, not in a wall to hide behind, but in the platform I now stood on. I thought of the hours spent piecing this together. The years I'd trusted Evan, believed his lies, defended his ambitions, and how those betrayals had carved me into someone stronger. Marla's hand tightened gently around mine. "You're almost there," she whispered. Then, the gavel cracked against the bench, silencing the room like thunder. "I've heard enough," the judge said. "The plaintiff's claim is without merit. The lawsuit is dismissed." The words hit like a wave, washing away months of dread and uncertainty. The room stirred. Whispers rose. But I didn't move. I sat still. The folder rested before me, no longer evidence of a wound, but proof of survival. Sarah turned, her smile firm, restrained. "We did it, Colin." I nodded, my throat tight, not with tears, but with something deeper. Relief. Vindication. Marla pulled me into a hug. Her scarf brushed my cheek, warm against the cold that had lived in me for too long. "I knew you'd win," she said. "You showed them who you really are." I glanced across the aisle. Evan's head was lowered, his hands clenched on the table. Alina stared at the floor, her purse limp in her lap, her composure gone. Their lawyer mumbled something, but they didn't respond. I should have felt satisfaction, but instead, it felt heavier. Like the final page of a book I never wanted to write. They hadn't just lost a case. They'd lost the illusion they'd clung to for years. The judge rose and exited. The courtroom emptied slowly, voices hushed. I gathered the folder, its pages now armor and weapon both. Marla walked beside me as we stepped into the hallway. Cooler air greeted us, but I stopped short. Evan stood by the exit, his silhouette framed in the fading daylight. He turned. His eyes found mine, dark, weighted, unreadable. Alina was next to him, whispering fast, her face pinched and pale. I tightened my grip on the folder. This wasn't over. The steps outside the courthouse were cold beneath my shoes, the skyline of downtown Elmbrook lit with streaks of orange and gold as evening settled in. I stood with Marla. The folder was tucked under my arm, not heavy anymore, solid. Finished. The crowd had thinned, but Evan and Alina lingered at the edge of the square, their figures small against the massive stone pillars behind us. They approached slowly, like children rehearsing an apology. Evan's hat was crushed in his hands. Alina's purse clutched close, her eyes fixed on the pavement. "Dad," Evan began. His voice was low, trembling. We were wrong. I'm sorry. We got carried away." He hesitated, searching for the right words, but none came. Alina spoke next, her voice stripped of polish. "It was a mistake, Colin. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Can we just move past it?" Her eyes lifted, pleading. But the arrogance was gone. What I saw instead was fear, a loss neither of them could spin. I looked at them, my son and his wife. Their faces pale, their world cracked. The courtroom had stripped them bare. Evan's deaths, Alina's fake image, their lies, once so carefully crafted, were now public record. Their friends had fallen silent, their carefully curated pages wiped clean. Their penthouse just another echo chamber of regret. I should have felt pity, but I didn't. "You didn't just lose a lawsuit," I said, my voice quiet, each word slicing through the cold. "You lost me." I stepped closer. The folder in my arms was firm. Final. You made this bed. Now you lie in it. Don't come looking for forgiveness. You don't get to rewrite the story. Evan's shoulders collapsed inward, his hat slipping through his fingers. Alina looked down, her purse suddenly useless. They turned without another word, their steps slow, uneven. They vanished into the crowd. I didn't chase them. I'd already done that for too many years. Now I was free. Marla touched my arm, her expression soft but steady, and we stood there, shoulder to shoulder, as the city moved on around us. "You were stronger than they ever knew," Marla said, her scarf fluttering in the breeze as we stepped away from the courthouse. "Come on, let's celebrate." We drove through the city, the lights bleeding into streaks of gold and silver as they passed us by. Her home welcomed me with familiar comfort, the old couch sagging in the middle, the air thick with the smell of fresh brewed coffee. We sat together, mugs in hand, maps spread across the table, the folder now pushed aside like a finished chapter. We talked of travel, of finally going somewhere new. Maybe the coast, maybe farther. A quiet adventure for two people who had been through the storm and made it outstanding. Marla laughed, her stories full of reckless detours and stolen sunrises. I added my own memories of younger years, forgotten roads, quiet places. Our voices overlapped, layered with something we hadn't spoken aloud but both felt. Something beginning. She set her mug down gently. This win, it's not just yours, Colin. It's for everyone who's ever been used up, overlooked. Everyone who had to fight just to be seen. Her eyes caught the light, sparking with something fiercer than joy. And in that moment, I didn't see her as just the neighbor who'd stood beside me in court. I saw her for what she really was, a partner in whatever came next. I nodded, my chest warm with the unfamiliar pull of possibility, of renewal. We clinked our mugs together. The sound rang softly, clear, clean. A note of something new. The folder still sat on her table, closed at last. A record of battles fought, but no longer my burden. The story it told was over. I thought of all the years I had spent chasing Evan's approval, all the sacrifices I'd convinced myself were love. And yet, despite all that, the justice I found wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd lost myself. Later that night, I stepped out onto Marla's porch. The air was crisp, the sky a sea of stars, brilliant and endless above me. I sank down onto the steps, my coat open, the cold welcome. Above, each star shimmered with quiet potential, each one a road I hadn't yet walked. And for the first time in years, I felt it. Peace, sharp and real, clean as the breath I drew into my lungs. The fight was over. The future was mine, and it was wide open. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Subscribe to keep this conversation going.